Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial for the link pages coding assignment. This assignment is corresponds to chapter 6 in the Pinkham book Django Unleashed. So the title of the chapter in the Pinkham book is Integrating Models, Templates, Views, and URL Configuration to Create Links Between Pages. So the fact is we're going to use most of the stuff we've already covered, but we're going to extend it, and what we're finally going to do is we're going to populate the HTML, the href attributes in the links. So the links that we have so far, the href attributes are all blank, or rather they're empty. And when you click on those, they just don't do anything at all. And when we're done with this tutorial, we're going to have everything linked up in the amount of the site that we have so far. Okay, so let's look at what we have so far. Okay, so I'm just going to fire up the server. Okay, and I'm going to run the manage Pi task and do a run server. Okay, and now I'm going to click through on that URL. And so far, we have not linked the URL pattern where we just have the domain name and nothing else. We've not linked it to anything at all. So when we click on that link that takes us to the domain, the URL is the numerical equivalent of the domain name without anything following it but a slash. Then we get a 404 page not found, and so we're going to fix that first. It turns out that the coding for doing that was covered in chapter 5, but I decided I liked it here better. So we've got that, and then we have so far. Let's see. We've got the list pages. So if we go to Instructor, we'll see the instructor list. Okay, but the links don't really do anything at all yet. Okay, and up here in the navigation, the links don't do anything. And then we have the detail pages. So if I ask for Instructor 1, I get me. So that's nice. So we have detail pages, and we can get to them by typing in the proper RESTful URL. This approach where we have the name of the resource as a way to request the list, and then the name of the resource, a slash, and then the key for the resource as a way to get the detail page. That's a part of the RESTful API that we are creating. And we just really want to implement that with the URLs that we populate into the links by populating the href attributes. Okay, so none of the links work. We have to type in all of the URLs, but we do have the list pages for instructor, section, course, semester, and students, and we also have the detail pages for each of those, and we had them all implemented and tested as of the last of the coding assignments. So what are we going to do here? Well, here's what we're going to cover. The first thing is we're going to find a way to intercept that the root URL. So if we don't specify a resource or a resource and a key, well, and we just say we want that domain name. Right now, that doesn't go anywhere at all. But we're going to redirect that. So that's the first thing that we're going to do, and then we're going to go about inserting the links into all of the pages. Okay, we're going to insert the links into the list pages first, and the detail pages next. And typical of these tutorials, I'm going to do a couple, and then I'm going to pause and give you time to do the rest. We're essentially cloning them at that point. It's good practice for you. And then we'll check in again at the very end. Okay, so let's see. So again, for the first thing we want to fix is if we just type in the domain name, we don't get anything at all. That's not found. It doesn't match any of the URL patterns. So let's go fix that. Okay. All right. So how are we going to fix that? Well, first of all, we want to go to the URLs .py file associated with the project as a whole. So where is that? Well, that's in the Easy University directory. We have urls.py. And right now, we are doing the two things there. One is if we get the URL that says that we want to go to the admin site, well, we're going to point to the URLs at .py that goes with the admin app. If we get a URL that doesn't have anything at all, we go to the course info URLs. Okay, and that's our current situation, and that's fine if we have further text as part of our URL string. Well, when we go to URLs at .py in the course info directory, well, then we're going to match the pattern there that's appropriate. But before we do any of that, we want to cut off the situation where we truly don't have anything beyond the domain name. Okay, so let's create a pattern for that. We're going to say URL, and it's a raw string, so it begins with an R. Okay, and that's for the regular expression pattern. So we want to start, you do that with the circumflex. We want to immediately end with a $sign. Okay, and then we're going to say, where's that going to go? Well, we're going to create a special view to handle that called redirect route. And this is what Pinkham calls that in the textbook, and this is a pretty common name for that kind of view. And now what we need to do is we need to import that view. So we can say from .views, because it's in the same directory, import redirect route. And it's not coming up in the auto completion yet because it doesn't exist. Okay? And it doesn't like views yet because if you look in our Easy University directory, it doesn't have a views yet. Okay, we're going to have to add that. So let's do that. So let's go to Easy University, say we want a new Python file, and we want it to be called views. and it's going to put the .py on it itself. Okay. And what do we want that to say? Well, we want it to be really short, okay? Here's what we want to do. Let's leave room for some imports at the top. Okay? So this is going to be a function-based view. There's no real advantage to using a class-based view for this one. This is kind of rudimentary plumbing, so we're not going to waste a class-based view. So we're going to say def, and then the function is going to be called redirect route. And of course, it's going to get called with a request. It's coming in from the browser. Okay, and then what's the code? Well, we want to return, and we're going to use one of the shortcuts, redirect. We're going to have to import that. And then what do we want to redirect to? Well, we have to pick which view we want to go to. Okay, so which view do we want to go to? When you come in to this application, well, what would a typical user want to be saying? And I decided that the typical user would want to work on the section list. That was kind of arbitrary, but it has to do with my use case for it. And so, what's the name of that URL pattern? Well, that's course info section list. And of course, I've been putting URL pattern on the end so we know what we're really pointing at. Okay, that's great, but we don't have a redirect. So let's highlight that word and give it an alt return. And it says, well, we think you mean import Django shortcuts redirect. I go, yeah, that's it. So I'm going to click on that, and there it is. So now, when we come here to the view, we're going to redirect as though they had typed in the URL pattern for the section list. Okay. Now this is kind of a nice thing to do. This keeps us from, this creates a level of indirection here. Could we have, for instance, could we have gone to this and said, okay, what we would like to do is to go to, we could cut out the middleman and just say that we wanted to go to the URL pattern for the section list. And we could, but it turns out that it's going to be more maintainable over time to have a place where we know what we're going to do for this redirect for the root. And this is a kind of a nice home for it. Okay? So that's still pretty good. And I've got one error left. Let me find that, and we'll clear it, and I'll be right back. And that was a pretty easy one. At the end of all these URL patterns, at the end of each one, they are actually entries in a list, and they need a comma. So I didn't have a comma there. All right, now that's been solved. So if we look at this, I don't have any errors in views. I don't have any errors in URLs. Okay, so we should be able to go back down. Provided that we save the code, we shouldn't have to restart the development server. So when we click this link, this should take us, this is test case exactly that we want. What happens when we just enter the domain name? It should take us to section list. Let's see. section list. Yay. Okay, we got that working. Okay. If we wanted to go somewhere else, for instance, if we had wanted to go to, if we had wanted to go to instructor list, okay, we can say, oh, well, the usage isn't exactly what we thought. We thought we wanted to go to the instructor list. We can come right back there, change that, and now we're going to the instructor list. So it's very maintainable this way, and it's well documented. But of course, I am going to change it back because I wanted mine to be the section list. Okay. Do that, and we'll try one more test. Section list works like $1,000,000. That's great. Okay, so what do we want to do now? So the next thing that we want to do is we want to go to our Nav Links. Okay, we've got a bunch of Nav Links. Where are they? Well, they're down here in our, they're up here in our base.html. Okay, and if you go to the nav section, we have a link to instructors, one to sections, one to courses, one to semesters, one to students, and they're not really linked to anything at all. So what we want to do now is we want to put the code in that it's going to generate the URL that we're looking for. Well, in Chapter 6, Pinkham goes through a couple of approaches that you could use to doing this. And he settles on one in the end that we're going to use. Okay, so we're going to take one approach. And the approach is that we're going to use a template tag, and the tag is going to include URL. So it's going to say we want a URL, and then it is going to have the name of a URL pattern. Okay, so and what's going to happen, which is really cool, is that the URL patterns as we use them so far are kind of unidirectional. Okay, we get a URL string that comes in from the browser with the request, and we use the URL patterns to match that and to route to the view that we want to use. Well, it turns out that those URL patterns are more than that because they're classes, right? So if we go to URLs, and let's go to the URLs for course info. Let's just open that up. So we've got a whole bunch of these here. We have we've got the one for the instructor list, the one for the instructor detail, and all that kind of stuff. And we've been thinking of this not so much as an object that we're creating with a class, but we've a lot of us, at least when I first came to this, I kind of thought of this as sort of executable code. Okay, go here. But what this really is it creates a URL pattern object. And the URL pattern object, when you're going in the inbound direction, well, it acts with the infrastructure for Django to create routing. Well, what does it work when you're on the outbound side? Well, you can identify the pattern that you want with its name, and what it's going to do is it's going to put out the string that we're looking for. It's going to write the URL for you and you can plunk it into the href. Well, why is that good? Well, because all of the assumptions about how this URL works is in one spot. Okay, and we can use it on the inbound side for routing and on the outbound side for writing the URLs that we plunk into the hrefs. Okay, now the ones for the list are pretty simple. Okay, those are the first ones that we're going to do because you can tell, you can imagine the code that's inside this class to give us the URL string because it's really pretty close to the pattern that we've got up there. So you can imagine writing the code even yourself that would take that pattern and pick it apart and put out the right string. It gets a little more complicated when we've got further, kind of arguments. We have things like the instructor ID or the section ID or the student ID, but we'll get to that in a bit, okay? So let's see how this is going to work. Let's go back to base.html, okay? And let's look at what we're going to do. And we're going to put in a template tag, and we're going to use the one that is a curly brace and a %. So you type those in, and then it's looking for code. And you're going to start out with URL space, and then in apostrophes, you're going to put the name of the pattern that you want to link to. And this is going to be the instructor list. So that one's called course info underscore instructor list URL pattern right down there. So I take the autocomplete, and there it is. And that should do the job. Okay, let's test that. We just have one. All right, so we're going to save that. And let's run our test. And if I click on this instructors link, it should go to the instructor list page. It worked. Very good. Now the other links, they're still dead. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing for the sections. Okay, and then I'm going to pause and have you do the rest of them. So let's look at the sections. So this one's going to be pretty straightforward. And we're going to go in here, and we're going to say curly brace % URL, and then we're going to say course info. Okay. And then what do we want? Well, we want section list. So section list. It's the one right here. Double click on that. Okay. So I always like to do, on my Mac, I do a Command S to make sure it's saved, but I think this is being compulsive. It would be a Control S on the Windows. Okay, let's crank it up again. Okay, now the problem is we're already on the section list, so that's not going to do much. So let's click on instructors, go to the instructor list. Now let's click on sections. It does take us to the section list. And courses, semesters, and students are not implemented yet. Okay? So what I want you to do is to, we're going to pause here in a second, and I want you to put in these Nav links for courses, semesters, and students. And I'm going to pause, and we'll see you when you get back. Okay, now you should have them all working now. So as you can see, at this point, I've got, maybe I should make this text a little bigger. Should I? Yeah, a little bit. And maybe I'll move that down a little bit. Yeah, that's good. I like that better. Okay, so I've added the links for courses, semesters, and students. So again, if I go down to my development server, I click the link. I should be able to click on the nav link for courses, go to the course list, semesters, semester list, students, student list. Wow, that's quite nice. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. And of course, these should also be implemented on the detail pages because we use the same parent template. So for instance, if we go to student 3, okay, the nav pages should work from there as well. So if we want to go to, say, courses, we should go to courses. So one of the nice things about using templates, and a particularly nice thing about inheriting the templates, is the way that we can pretty quickly get common functionality spread throughout the app. And while we're here, I just want to point out, I'm looking at this base.html, and I guess I've talked about this before, but I want to emphasize it. What's really great about these template languages that are used in these application frameworks is that they save you a whole lot of coding time. If you were to write this page in Python, you could certainly do it, but you would have to print each line, right? So you would have to put the HTML text. You'd have to put all the text that goes out into the page. You'd have to put them into quotes or apostrophes, and you'd have to have a lot of printing. Okay, here one of the nice things is because our page is mostly markup. Okay, what the template approach allows us to do is just type in the markup as we would like it to go out. So the HTML just goes right in the clear. It doesn't have to be in special quotes. It doesn't have to be hanging off of a print. And the same for what would be data to the page. Okay, so for instance, down here on line 21, where we have Easy University, both the markup and the content that's inside the markup, we just type it in literally in the clear as it is. And because we're going to have a lot less code, it's only the code that gets special treatment. Okay, so in the places where we want some special action from the template engine, well, we give it an indicator that the special engine is to kick in and do some special work for us. So what's nice is the code-like things are what's in kind of special formatting, and all the rest of the stuff, all of the content and all the markup is just done in the same way you would type it into a static HTML page. And this it makes it much easier to code, easier to read and understand, and very much easier to maintain. And this approach is pretty common. So almost every framework has this kind of approach. Okay. Now, do they all have the same approach to how to insert the code? No, some of them use this kind of notation, some of them use other notation, but the general character of these templating languages is fairly comparable from language to language. Django even has a couple of them. We're using the original one, the DTL, the Django template language, which is a very popular one. Okay? All right, we've done that. So what do we do next? Well, we want to implement the linking for the instructor list page. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to go to the instructor list, and we want to make sure that the links to all the instructors on that list, they go somewhere. Well, what do we mean? Well, let's look. If we go to the instructor page, these links don't go anywhere, okay? Because the hrefs are not filled in. So now what we want to do is we want to take the same kind of approach. We're going to use the URL pattern that we use for the detail page, okay? But we're going to have to provide just a little bit more information. So let's see what that looks like. Okay. So let us go to our instructor list page. Instructor list. And we'll make that code a little bit bigger. Okay? And we like this page except that it doesn't put an href in. Okay, well, that could get better. So what are we going to do? Well, in the text in chapter 6, Pinkham goes into a nice discussion and says, well, we could do it the kind of obvious way. Well, what would be the obvious way? Well, we take the same kind of approach that we just used on the Nav Links. Okay, so let's look what we did on the Nav Links. Well, we have this template tag. We say we want to access the URL, and we want to use the pattern called course info instructor list URL pattern. And of course, we don't have to send it any data because there are no variables that we have to insert. We don't have to insert the instructor ID or anything like that. So we could take this kind of approach, except we'd have to give a little more information for the detail list. For the instructor detail, we'd have to give it access to the instructor ID that we want. Okay, so he does, I think, a real good discussion about how to do that in a straightforward way. But then he introduces this idea that every detail page for one of the resources in your application, in this case, the resource is a row in a table. Okay, every detail page should be. There should be a default one for every instance of the model. So let's say we have an instructor model class, and the rows in the table are the instances of the model class. Then the instructor class should have a method that we could call to get the URL that takes us to the default page, to the detail page for that. Okay, so I think it's a nice idea. Do they have this in every framework? No, they don't have this in every framework, but it's a pretty cool idea, and I like it. And it's a practice that I like to follow when I'm using Django. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, we're going to use another template tag, this time with the double curly, and we're going to take the instructor object, instructor, and then we're going to say dot, and we're going to call one of the methods get absolute URL. Okay, absolute, default, whatever you want to call it. The term of art is get absolute URL. That's what they use. Okay, that's great. that'll get us the URL back that we want, but that just kind of kicks the can down the road. That says that we need to go to the instructor model class, and we need to implement this. Okay? What code do we put there? Pretty much the same code that we would have put here if we didn't want to create this absolute URL scheme. Okay, so we've just kind of kicked it to the model class. Okay, so let's go to the model class. So let's find models. Okay, and we want it for instructor. Okay, so what are we going to do for the instructor model? So it's going to be a method. Now, for me, I like to put the methods before I would put internal classes. So we already have the string method. I'm going to put the get absolute URL immediately after that. Typically, I skip one line in this kind of circumstance in the code. And then I say def, and then the method's called get absolute URL. And of course, we're going to call it with a reference to the object itself, so self. Okay, so that's great. And then what do we do in here? Well, we're going to use a method called reverse. Okay, and what does reverse do? Well, it takes the functionality of the URL pattern and it runs it backwards. So they like to think of that as reversing it. Okay, so that's a term of art that they use. So they want to reverse, and what do we want to reverse? Well, we want to point it to the pattern that we want to use. Okay, so it's the detail pattern for instructor. So course info, instructor, detail, URL pattern. It's that easy. Okay, so that's great. It knows the pattern, but doesn't it have to know what's the key that we want to use in forming the URL? Yeah, it does. So what's the key for the model? What does it need to find? Well, it needs the instructor ID. Okay, so now we're going to have to pass it some kind of a parameter that it can retrieve the instructor ID from. And here's what we're going to do. We have a named a parameter called quargs, keyword arguments, equals, and quargs is typically a dictionary. Okay, so then we have a name. Okay, and I'm going to say requested instructor ID. And of course, like any dictionary entry, we have a colon. And then what's the field that we want to use? Well, self instructor ID. Okay. Okay, now we're having a problem with this import here. I'm getting a lot of blinking and stuff down here. So let's resolve this import. So again, I'm going to do an alt return. Import this name. Well, let's see if it works. Did it? It did not. Don't like that. So let's go up here and add it by hand. So it's in a package called Django.core.url resolvers. So say from Django.core.url resolvers import reverse. It's that easy. And now my blinking has really gone away. I get a lot of this kind of blinking and a lot of computing going on in some of these modules when I have unresolved imports. So it's good for me to get there quickly. Okay. So why did I use requested instructor ID? Well, that's what we're expecting to get in. You'll remember that the parameters that we used, we decided that we didn't want to say stuff like instructor ID, and you couldn't tell where things are from. The requested instructor ID is what's coming in from the request. So requested instructor ID, I think, is a good name for it. Okay, so all of these things that we're going to do are going to have about the same pattern. All right, and this should do it. Okay, so it's a combination of putting the real working code into this get absolute URL, and then back in the template, just invoking the call to that method to get that done. And we consider that a better design because anywhere in our application where we want to get kind of the base rendering of this object, we can go back and say we want to get the absolute URL. Okay? I think it's worth the effort. It's one level of indirection. Okay, well, shouldn't we be ready to test? Yeah, I think we should. So let's do it. Okay. Let's come here. Okay. And let's go to the instructors list. And guess what? We have a problem. And you'll see UR pattern is not a valid view function or pattern. Well, it should be URL pattern. So let's shrink that. And let's say here, back in our models, we should have said URL pattern. Okay. And I'm going to save that because I just can't help myself. And then I'm going to go back to my browser, and I'm going to say, okay, let's just give it a refresh. And there it is. Okay. So now I got my page out, and Delori Jane. Instructor none. Well, that didn't work at all. Now, what's interesting is that here's what we're putting out. Instead of putting out instructor 1 or instructor 2 or instructor 3, it's coming out as instructor none. Well, that's not what I wanted. And that's not what I have on the already baked version. So I'll be right back. So I only had to look at this for a second to realize that well, I've got requested instructor ID equals self instructor ID. I would think that would work. I'll be back again. Well, that took a little while. Rookie mistake, but on one that you're going to get the benefit from without the head banging. In models, when I added the new method, okay, I had left off return. Okay, So it read just like this. Okay. Well, it never returned a value. Okay. Um, and so that's why we were seeing that the answer was none. So we need to return this expression, not just calculate it. What's kind of interesting is that you can call a function, right, like reverse, and typically what you would do is you would either assign the result to a variable to hold it, or you might return it. Okay, but I didn't do either. So what happens when you have code that looks like this? Well, it calculates the value and it just throws it away. Oops, that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted it to say return. So after getting past that rookie error, if I come back here, all right, and I go and get my instructor list, and let's say go to Jane DeLaurie, one of my all-time favorite high school teachers. Here's Jane DeLaurie's page. And if I go to Kevin Trainer, here's Kevin Trainer's page. Now, I just want to point out that whereas I have populated the link to the instructor detail page, I haven't populated the links on the instructor detail page. So these are still all dead. Okay, that's going to be the second part of this that we're going to do. Okay, so we got the instructor list to behave the right way. And now if you look in the instructor list, the nav links all work. Okay, and the links to the detail pages all work. So we've got that in terms of linking pages, we're done for that. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you another one and I'm going to allow you to do the others. Okay, so the first one we did was instructor, right? And then the next one that we're going to do is section, because that's potentially the hardest one. All right, so what's that going to look like? Well, let's do this in the order that we did it before. So let's go to section detail.html, section detail.html. No, that's not true. Section list. Just go to section list. That's the right place. Gotta make my type look a little bigger. And yeah, oh, here's where we don't have what we need. Okay. And so we're going to do the double curlies, and we're going to say section, because that's the name of this object. And we are going to say get absolute URL. Section get absolute, don't do that, absolute URL. And in this case, this really is a method call. So we're going to put the parens there. Or are we? No, we're not. Sorry. You would think you would, but apparently you don't. Very nice. What did we do when we did instructor list? No parens. I'd like to tell you that there's a rule in this as to when you're expected to put the parens in and when you're not. And there is a rule, but it's pretty darn sophisticated, and I don't think it's going to help right now. So I think you're just going to do this by modeling the behavior that seems to work in the tutorial, because the rule is complex enough that it will probably do more harm than good. Okay, so again, where were we there? Where we were on section list, And we've added section.get absolute URL. That's good. Now we just have to make that work in section. Okay, so let's find section. I think that's the last one that we did. Okay. Go to models. And there it is. So I'm going to put it after string and before the internal class meta. And so we're going to say def get absolute URL self. Okay, that's good. And we want some code. Okay. And what's that going to look like? Well, we're going to say return. Okay, that looks good. In fact, let's just take the code that we had for Instructor and let's try to clone it. Okay? In fact, why don't we try to clone the whole thing? That works for me. So I'm going to come down here to section. Okay. And I'm going to say, all right, we're going to take the one right out of Instructor, but we're going to change things. Okay, get absolute URL. It has the same name. That's the standard name. So is it course info instructor detail? No, it's course info structured section detail. Okay. Is it requested instructor ID? No, it's requested section ID. Is it self instructor ID? No, it's self section ID. Okay, that should work. So I think we've done a pretty good job of cloning that one. And we typically we want 2 blank lines between these things that are at the top level, like in this case, I think everything in the module is at the top level is class. But once we get inside the class, we want to separate these members of the class with just a single blank line. So I've got one too many blank lines here. Let me get rid of that. Okay. So let's go back to the server. So we're on the sections list right now. So let's see if that works. What happens if we click on the first one? Well, we go to the section page. Very nice. Okay. Now look, remember, right? The links on the section page, on the detail page, they're still not fixed. Okay, so I've got a lot of links that I'm putting out here, but they're not connected to anything yet. But the links from on the section list page to the sections, I did the first one, let me do the last one, they're hooked up. That's nice. So what are we going to do? Okay, well, we're going to have you do the next ones. Okay, so what did we do? So we did the instructor and the section, and you're going to do the course, the semester, and the student. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here while you get the links in on the list of pages to the detail page, and we can essentially do it by cloning code, and you're going to add the code for course list, semester list, student list. See you soon. Okay, and we're back. So what you should have done was to use kind of a cloning approach and to put the code into the lists for course list, semester list, and student list. And then to put the call code into the model classes in models.py. So in my code, if I look at course, I have a get absolute URL now. And if I look at semester, I've got a get absolute URL. And of course, I changed the parameters so that they're appropriate. And if I look down at student, I've got a get absolute URL as well. And then, of course, if I go to test, I ought to be able to go to the course list and click on a course. And I ought to be able to go to the semesters list and click on a semester. And I ought to be able to go to the students list and click on a student. Okay, and then when I go to these detail pages, the nav links should work. Okay, those should be fine. But the bottom part, the detail part, all those links should still be dead. And how are we going to fix that? Well, we're going to go to the detail pages next, and we're going to populate the links in there, and then we'll pretty well be linked up. Okay? So let's go do that. Okay, so what we need to do is fill out the links, populate the links on the detail pages, and we're going to be in a pretty good spot. So let's look at the detail pages. As usual, what I like to do is go in the order that they are in the nav section, just because I have to have some order, and we've already picked that order. So that would mean we're going to look at the instructor detail page. So we've opened it up, and let's look at this. Okay. So what are we going to do? Well, we've already got pretty well everything populated except the href on the section. Okay, and we already know how to get the href for a particular section. And what's that? Well, remember, we just used it on the section list page. So we're going to put in a double curly for a template tag, and we're going to say section get absolute URL. And now, because get absolute URL is already defined in that class, in the model class for section, well, it comes up in the autocompletes. So get absolute URL comes up in the autocompletes, and that should do it. Okay, it's the only thing we have to get. So let's look at that. So this is the instructor detail page. All right, so let's go. We're still landing on the section list. That's good. Let's go to instructor list page, and let's go to Jane Delory. And oh, she doesn't have any sections. All right, she's not good. Okay, let's go to me, Kevin Trainer. Oh, look, I've got 4 sections, so I should be able to click through and get to those pages. So 110001 in spring 2018, I got there. And 110001 in summer 2018, that's good. 490002 in fall 2017, I got there. And 490201 in fall 2017, I got there too. All right, well, that's working great. So we have the instructor detail page working. That's good. So we do instructors, and then we're going to do sections. Okay. So where's the section detail page? Here it is. Let's open it up. Now the section has some more things. So a section is for a semester, so there's a detail page for that. It's for a particular course, there's a detail page for that. And then we have a list of instructors, there are detail pages there. And there are a list of students, and there are detail pages there. We're taking the same approach on all these, so I'm going to do them all at once, and then we'll test them all, okay? So, again, we'll get inside the href attribute, put in a double curly for a template tag, and we're going to say semester dot get absolute URL. It's that simple. That's good. So it's for a semester. And it's for a course, so let's do that one. So put in the double curlies again. Okay, we're going to say course get absolute URL. It's that simple. Like shooting fish in a barrel. Okay, now we're on our list of instructors, and that's got that for construct there, that loop. So double curly for the template tag, and we're going to say instructor get absolute URL. And now we're going to go down to the student and do the same thing. So double curlies, student get absolute URL. So that should do it for us. And let's go down and test. Okay, so we're on a section list. Okay, let's pick a section. Let's pick 490.002 in the fall of 2017. Do we have something with everything? Yeah, we do. So the semester, you might often think that we don't need a link for semester, but what we really want to do is we really want to be able to jump around this set of pages the same way you're able to navigate the database. So if, for instance, you're looking at this and then you go, you know what, I didn't want, I'm in the right semester, let's just say, what else is in the fall of 2017? Just, you can see those. And then you can come back and say, oh, okay, I found out that. Let's go on. So the semester link works. The course link, yeah, that works too. Good. What about the instructor link on the instructors list? Yeah, that worked. And what about the student link? Yeah, that worked too. Good. All right, working together. So, so far we have done, working together, we've done the instructor, and we've done the section. Okay. Now I'm going to I'm going to pause and have you do the last three, which would be the course, the semester, and the student. And remember, if we've got more than one list, we've got some. We need to populate all the links on the page. Okay, that's probably the easiest way to say it. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to do mine, and I'll come back, and we'll compare notes. Okay? There you go. Okay, so at this point, you should have filled in the code to populate the href attributes for the course detail, the semester detail, and the student detail pages. And hopefully you've done your testing. here just to see where I am. I've made all those changes. And I can go to the course list and pick a course. And if I want to go to that section, I go to that section. So that's good. And I can go to the semester and I can say, okay, let's click on a semester. And I go to the semester page for that. And if I want to go to a particular section, I go to the section. Or I can click on the student list and I can pick a student. And then if I want to go see that section that they're in, I can go click on that. And the idea of this kind of design is that users can find their way to exactly where they want to be. You have really each of the lists acts as an entry point into the finding aid of this system. Okay, so if you know you want to find something by the instructor, you can start there. If you know the section, you can start there. So for instance, let's say we know that somebody is in one of my classes. Okay, so we can go to the list of instructors, and we can say, okay, Kevin Trainer, and okay, Kevin's teaching only one course in the spring of this year, 2018, so it's probably in there. And then we can say, oh, Adam Jones is that person. You go, is Adam Jones registered for anything else? I don't know. Let's look. Let's click on Adam. Yeah, he's also taking 340 systems analysis. Let's go look at that. So we go look at that. And then we'd say, okay, 340, is that really systems analysis? And we click through and go, oh yeah, introduction to systems analysis. So the beauty of the design of this kind of application is that there isn't only one way in. From a finding point of view, any of these entities, any of these model classes, any of these tables can be an entry point where you can find an instance that you like, and then you can just surf your way to exactly the data that you want and exactly the question that you want to answer. Now, are we done? Well, no, we're not done. And there's a lot to be done yet. In particular, the only way we have to enter data into the system is using the admin application. And the admin application is, one, it's crude, and two, it's not particularly, it doesn't have the best of user interfaces. It's particularly weak when we need to pick from a long list of possible values. It's particularly weak when we're trying to add, say, the students to the course. But there's some other weaknesses as well. So there's a lot of functionality to be added. We're going to be adding the ability to add instructors and sections and courses and semesters and students, to change them, to delete them. And we're going to do that primarily with forms. So forms are coming up. We'll be starting with forms in the next of our tutorials. So until then, I'm going to say bye. Bye-bye.